All right, first question. Let's get rolling. Our son Lawrence is 7 years old and he has not had any episodes of epileptic seizures. Will he have any as he gets older? He has loss of function.
I wish I knew the answer. So this fits with a loss of function story. All we can say is what we've seen from the data so far. We don't have a way of being able to predict for an individual if and when they will have seizures. What we have seen is that the majority of children on the loss of function end, the seizures tend to be earlier than that. They tend to be in the sort of 2 to 5 year bracket. That said, we saw an example of Jaylene, who had seizures developing later than that, and we've seen other kids in that area. I think it is fair to say we don't know exactly how to predict who will have seizures at what time. We know relatively little about what happens to children as they become adults and as those adults age. It would be wonderful if we had a way of being able to give reassurance to this. The other thing I would say is that most children on the loss of function end don't have seizures, but we can't guarantee it. We are starting to understand why those seizures take place. That's work we've seen done from Kevin's lab, which gives us some insight in thinking about therapeutics, but we really don't have a clear answer yet.
Maybe one quick thing to add, and I can't certainly answer that, but our pursuit of kind of more proactive management of SCN2A and to empower our caregivers of having that knowledge of the potential for seizures. You should have conversations with your neurologist of, what did that look like? How should we be prepared if that were to ever happen? Hopefully it won't, but taking that more proactive approach of caregiver empowerment allows you to be better prepared for your child.
Great. Second question, are scientists on the verge of discovering a cure for children with loss of function SCN2A as well?
I think we would stray away from using the word cure. We hope for a cure, but we aim for a treatment in that we don't know exactly how much we'd be able to improve symptoms, even with a perfect genetic therapy given at birth or at 6 years. I think on the verge is probably a little optimistic, but there is a large group of people working on this question. There's probably even more people working on it that we don't know about it because SCN2A is so high up on that list of developmental delay. And then I would emphasize that last slide. It doesn't necessarily need to be us who finds the therapy. Success in any neurodevelopmental delay with these approaches could easily translate towards us and potentially quite quickly. But we're all working on it.
Early signs from the animal data are very encouraging as well. So there are still the gaps that remain, but I think you started off your State of the Union that the State of the Union is strong, and I think that is well stated for loss of function.
Third question, how close are we to vector treatment / gene therapy, either for epilepsy or SCN2A as a whole for adults?
This is almost a question of faith. We've seen amazing progress in mice in being able to get vectors into the brain to the point where now it is possible to treat most neurons in a living mouse brain with a vector, which 5 years ago, that would have sounded like science fiction. We can't at the moment do the same in a human brain. And we find that the solution in mice doesn't easily go to different species. But the fact that we know it's possible in one living brain definitely gives cause for optimism. There are a lot of different ways of doing this. There's viruses, there's nanoparticles, there's just giving reagents with tags and peptides on them. All of them are being pursued. This is a question which is relevant to Alzheimer's, to multiple sclerosis, to developmental delay. And so it's something which it's not just the rare field, but lots and lots and lots of big companies are working on this. My instinct is we will start to see something which looks promising in the next 2 to 3 years, but we'll see how well that prediction works out. I think the question for us as a group, if such a vector was published tomorrow, what would we do to make sure that the route from getting to that publication to the first treatment in SCN2A was as short as possible?
We have a couple Zoom questions. Is it okay if I ask a couple of those?
I got one more. Real quick, can you tell me if a person is GOF, LOF, mild GOF, or mixed just by knowing the gene variant of the individual?
No.
That was a very quick question and a quick answer.
There are some variants where we could have a reasonable guess. For example, if we've seen it before, or if it's a certain type of variant which tends to be more similar to others. What I think is more easy to determine is from the clinical story. There are some stories which are very clearly gain of function. Some are very clearly loss of function. The ones in the middle, that's where we need to combine the work done on biophysics with the clinical phenotype, with the dragonfly study. I think it will be a solvable question, but it is from putting all of that data together that we will get there. I hope one day the answer will be yes.
All right. I have a lot of other questions, but I think they'll be more relevant as the day goes on and we have other talks. But I want to keep these in mind for the future speakers. Are there MD training programs being developed for treating adults with childhood diseases as they live much longer? I believe we have a talk coming up. There's another one that says, what would be the concerns and risks of ASO? Where are we now on ASO development in SCN2A? There's a gene therapy talk coming up either today or tomorrow. I don't know if you want to address that.
I could take a crack at that one. ASOs are being given routinely to hundreds of thousands of people every year into the spine in the same way, in a disorder called SMA. They work and they have a good safety record. Our objective is to take that same chemistry and modify it to be working in SCN2A. The hope would be that it also inherits the safety profile. They are relatively new as a class of drugs, so we can't guarantee that that safety profile comes with it, which necessitates testing. I think there's also the challenge that we don't know how well that testing predicts safety in a human. And so the route forward is to start off with an individual where the risks are justified by the potential benefit, and then start slowly. But I think that's become a fairly well-established paradigm. So there is some risk, but we're getting much, much, much better at handling.
All right. I've got other questions that, again, will be likely answered in the next sessions. Our warrior has deformed ankles. Is this associated with SCN2A or 8A? I believe we have a genetic counseling talk and also an orthopedic talk coming up in the next day or two. Yeah, my son has variants of both SCN2A and 8A genes. Is that common?
No. It would be interesting to talk with a clinical geneticist and a clinician to dig into that. My instinct is that one of them would be more likely to be pathogenic than the other, but I'd love to hear more.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so we have two more questions from chat. My son has a loss of function variant, but he has very severe symptoms. He started having infantile spasms at 11 months. Now he has myoclonic. He's very delayed GI issues, G-tube fed, nonverbal, immobile. Is this still falling into the loss of function category, or does he now fall into gain of function plus loss of function? Or is this something we can't tell directly from his variant? And in terms of like therapies for the future, she really is curious to know.
It's a really good question. The model, there is a saying within computational and biological work, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And what I've presented here absolutely fits within that. For the groups where it's fairly well characterized, it is a useful model which we can use for making clinical decisions, but it doesn't fit everyone. We were talking yesterday about the truth behind this. And that is that there actually are probably 20 or 30 different types of gain of function. There's probably similarly 20 different types of loss of function. You can have both of them together. And I expect that's probably closer to the reality for that sort of story, is that maybe it's 90% loss of function, but 10% gain of function, and you start to head more into that mixed bracket. And this is where we hope, by putting together detailed electrophysiological biochemical understanding and clinical insights, for example, the dragonfly study and biomarkers, that we will start to have a clear answer to this. And then as the therapies come along, we need to be very conscious about what are the definitions to make sure that they are safe. And that is a discussion which we need to have as a group.
Thank you. And this question is actually also very good. How do we engage our epileptologists on these types of discussions who do not have the capacity to travel to these conferences and ensure that they are updated on the most recent research and studies?
Happy to tackle that one. So I think a big part is empowering yourself as the caregiver. We provide a lot of resources, and we're going to continue to keep building on that to, give you the resources to be the champion for our children. We're still, unfortunately, in a world where that's kind of the role that we have to play as parents and caregivers, is to be the expert on our child. There aren't enough SCN2A experts in the world. But ways that we're actively working to facilitate to raise the level of care. We launched our first multidisciplinary center this year, and we expect to continue to launch those going forward. And the idea with those is that won't be kind of your primary neurologist for most people, but they'll act as a consult to get you up to speed on best management for your child, and to form a network with your current neurologist to help raise their level of care as well. In the second half of this year, we're also going to be having kind of medical grand rounds with where your neurologist could call in and present their case, and we could have our experts on the call and provide additional feedback on that. So a provider to provider level of education. But I think that the best advice I can give today is, we're still in a world where the caregivers have to play a big role in the medical management of their children, and use us as a resource. It's our job and responsibility to help educate and raise your level of knowledge.
As a parent, I just want to add, I always ask the providers where I live, there's not a lot of experts. I just give them the SCN2A.org, and they almost always go, and they get help, and they get information, and they know who to contact because these folks are there.
Thank you. I do have one more question, and this is a good one. Why should I participate in research?
Because it leads to therapies.
Because
and
we have so much time in the world. Why not?
Yeah,
I think in SCN2A, that is more true than maybe in any other disorder. There seems to be a very close relationship between the genetics and between the symptoms, and it's a complex relationship. And the only way we'll make progress is by everyone working together. We will do everything we can to make sure that data is shared with the people it should be. But it really, to get to therapies, one of the things we will be judged on is how well as a community everyone is participating.
Maybe adding to that as well. I mean, there's forward-looking future therapies, which research is fundamental and instrumental in order to develop that. But research also helps us understand what SCN2A looks like and how to manage it now. And that engagement in research helps, frame what SCN2A looks like, and allows us to optimize the clinical care today within the current medicines as well. So it has benefits today and benefits tomorrow.
Couple more questions. What are known dental problems for SCN2A? Is it common? Known dental problems besides traumatic.
Yeah.
Dental.
Besides
Meds.
Pardon?
The meds.
Yeah, so there are a number of meds that can impact dental care, but I do think it has been characterized as a known issue, particularly with gain of function SCN2A. But there are instances with loss of function dental issues as well.
traumatic.
I have a question for Anita. So you have, it's taken you a long time before you got a diagnosis. Has that been, life-changing to emotionally, but also for Jaylene to get the right treatment?
So the treatments didn't change for her because they didn't know, there was a big question mark, but her doctors were diligent and found what worked for her. And so when I got the name, the label, I have made appointments with her specialists and said, oh, look, we can do something. And they said, you know what? She's where she needs to be. They did look into it, but they didn't change a thing because they had really done a good job and been diligent. For me, I mentioned it, it was huge. Where I live, she is still the only one. And it was a huge question mark. And I used to joke they were going to find it and name it after her because we really thought we were the only ones. And at that time, 1 of 45 was pretty much still the only ones. But it brought me a community, and this is what we needed. You guys normalized so much of what she goes through. Just seeing it through all of you guys, the younger ones, the older ones. She's 26 now. She's right now in one of her good health spots. And so we're traveling and we're doing things we haven't been able to do. So I don't know.
Yes, thank you. So we will wrap up now unless there's other questions. Again, thank you, Dr. Sanders, for delivering our State of the Union address. The only thing you didn't do was suggest new laws and policies. So that's our next talk. Sean, again, thank you for wrapping up the near impossible task of giving us the cliff notes of yesterday's roundtable. And Anita, thank you for sharing your story with us. We will now take a break and resume at 11 a.m. sharp.